had with the heavens, a connection so strong that they integrated it into structures that have stood for thousands of years.
Some of the Maya buildings in the Maya cities, like Chichen Itza, whole buildings were constructed solely for the purpose of making astronomical observations. Certain sight lines were built in stone, so that on a certain day of the year, the sun would appear, or a star would appear exactly there on this day alone.
The Great Pyramid itself shows that the shafts of within the King's Chamber, and now subsequently discovered the Queen's Chamber, are sighted in such a way that at a certain period of time they open to the position of Sirius in the sky, and in the other case, I believe it is one of the belt stars of Orion. So you might say that the Egyptians are tuning the Great Pyramid to these stars, which play, in fact, a very important role within Egyptian symbolism and in Egyptian mythology.
It wasn't until the early 1990s that archaeologist Robert Bauval found that the three Great Pyramids on the Giza Plateau are a direct reflection of the stars in Orion's belt. This pivotal observation again shows that ancient cultures placed great value on the movement of the heavens. It's not surprising that many ancient artifacts contain celestial images. Rams, fish, and bulls were long mistaken as mere pagan symbols, but we now know they represent constellations and were used to portray astronomical positions. For example, the Greco-Roman Mithraic culture was once considered to be the last pagan religion flourishing in the 100 years before Christ. But look closely and notice the ring of constellations in this bas-relief excavated from a Mithraic temple.
One of the interesting things over the last 30 years, I think, is in seeing the sacred space of the Mithraea, of the temples to Mithra, as containing a star map in one form or another. And so the way in which these devotees thought about themselves in relation to the universe, we now think much more heavily that the answers lay in the stars.
Although these cultures were highly advanced, they seemed to decline into a worldwide dark age. Ancient Egypt, the Greek and Roman empires, the megalithic and Mayan civilizations all collapsed and their knowledge was lost. To Plato and others, this fall of civilization was an inevitable part of the cyclical nature of the great year, unlike the linear model that modern historians suggest.
They postulate straight line type civilization, therefore using that as a paradigm. Everything that came earlier has to be more, can't be as refined as what we have now, and everything in the future is going to improve. But obviously, if we look at the facts, the records, we see that that is not true.
Virtually all civilizations all over the world, including so-called primitive societies, which have no connection with each other, have certain things in common. Practically all of them have deluge myths. Practically all of them talk about earlier times, golden ages, when people lived longer and were much more enlightened and advanced. And then they go downhill. To me, the only way to really understand that is to take seriously the Hindu or Vedic notion of the yugas. In other words, that there is a cycle corresponding to spring, summer, autumn, winter, and we might say that this prevails metaphysically or spiritually to the human race itself.
This cycle of the ages was given different names by different cultures. To the Greeks, it was the Great Year, broken down into 4 periods: the Iron, Bronze, Silver, and Golden Ages, each age having its own distinct characteristics. The saints and sages of ancient India called it the Yuga cycle. The Babylonians and Egyptians had still other names for it, and the Greco-Roman Mithraic culture identified it simply by its observed celestial movement, the precession of the equinox. One of the most obvious astronomical cycles is the occurrence of the spring and fall equinoxes, the 2 days of the year where day and night are exactly equal in length. Ancient calendars were set by these consistent markers, which are still used today to calibrate universal time. And ancient star watchers faithfully observed the celestial movements and patterns in the sky. A key observation was that certain constellations followed the same path in the sky as the sun. These 12 constellations make up the zodiac and were considered the most important. Twice each year, on the day of the equinox, when they made their observations, ancient astronomers realized that over time the constellations were not in the exact place in the sky that they had been the year before. The stars seemed to be moving backwards across the sky, a movement known as the precession of the equinox.
This is the phenomenon that we see, that the positions of these stars, when we look from Earth and look up to them at a certain time of the year, then they will not be in that same position in thousands of years to come, or they were at that position thousands of years ago.
The Mithraic culture, which flourished in ancient Greece and Rome, believed that their main god, Mithra, was responsible for creating precession.
One of the ways to try to describe or try to explain the bull-killing scene is to see the bull as the constellation Taurus, and to see Mithras as Perseus, ending the age of Taurus, ending the remote period in which the constellation Taurus was dominant, somewhere between 4000 and 2000 BCE.
At the birth of Christ, the constellation Aries was becoming less dominant in the night sky at the time of the spring equinox, and the constellation Pisces was moving in to take its place. Pisces is the constellation associated with the Christian symbol of the fish. We are still in Pisces today. Very soon, the spring equinox will fall in Aquarius. This dawning of the age of Aquarius is a modern reference to the motion of the great year. As the equinox moves through the constellations of the zodiac, the North Pole points to different stars in the northern sky.
You look above the North Pole vertically and you will see the polar star. And 13,000 years from now, there will be not the polar star above you, but some star which is very far away from today's polar star, which will